In what appeared to be one of the largest narcotic seizures in Kenya's history, authorities intercepted over 1 ton of cocaine stashed away inside a coastal residence in Malindi and a nondescript warehouse in Embakasi. The scale of the operation stunned even the veteran officers, but instead of celebrating, law enforcement quickly shifted into containment. The entire haul was quietly airlifted, not to a standard evidence facility, but to a heavily fortified compound under the watch of the elite General Service Unit. Access was restricted, and only one man was trusted with the key. The man was Erastus Chemorei, a seasoned officer, respected, disciplined, and by all accounts, incorruptible. He was placed in charge of securing the drugs, a role that should have elevated his status, but instead marked him for something far more sinister. Meanwhile, as the investigation widened, authorities turned their attention abroad. The owners of the Malindi property, an Italian couple, were detained. The tenants, however, had fled. No fingerprints, no forwarding address, just a paper trail leading out of the country. On the first day of 2006, then CID Chief Joseph Kamau assembled a specialized unit and departed for Europe. The itinerary was focused and telling. Spain, the alleged origin of the cocaine shipment, and Holland, where a key suspect named George Kiragu had been detained. The implication was clear. This wasn't a localized operation, it was transactional and incredibly well connected. But what none of them knew, at least not yet, was that the true danger wasn't just outside their borders, it was already within. Welcome back to Shadows of Justice, where we uncover the dark and the mysterious, stories that live in the dark corners between power, truth, and silence. Before we begin tonight's episode, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who stood by Nairobi Insights through everything. Your comments, your support, your shares, and your patience through the storms. We've been facing a few legal challenges recently, the kind that test your faith in what you do, but it's because of you that we're still here. Every like, every view, every message reminding us to keep going. That's what fuels this mission. If you'd like to help us cover the legal fees and keep Shadows of Justice alive, you can do so through the till on your screen or in the description or the pinned comment. Every little contribution helps us keep the light shining in places most people are too afraid to look. I want to take a moment to thank all of you for the support you've been showing the channel. If you haven't already, consider liking and subscribing to keep up. It helps more than you might think. Stay hydrated. I'm Melissa, and you are awesome. Back in Kenya, cracks in the system began to show. While police were pushing for a public trial of the suspect, then Director of Public Prosecution, Philip Morgor, wasn't convinced. He publicly voiced his concerns, hinting at a deeper issue within the investigation. Something fishy is going on, he warned. Words that, at the time, seemed bold, but in hindsight, almost prophetic. Because on February 19, 2005, just weeks after raising those alarms, Erastus Chemorei, the officer holding the key to the cocaine storage room, was shot dead at his home in Kitale. Not by criminals, but by a 50-man police unit. No one ever found out who gave the order, But what investigators did know was that it came from the very top. Then, as if timed for the maximum distraction, the news cycle was hijacked. On May 23, 2005, Philip Morgor, one of the few officials opened questioning the investigation, was fired live on national TV. His offense? Dropping charges against Tom Cholmondeley, a British aristocrat descendant who had shot and killed a KWS officer on his private ranch. The spectacle made headlines, but beneath it, something far more calculated was playing out, and someone was cleaning up loose ends. Just 2 days after his public dismissal, former DPP Philip Morgor broke his silence, and what he revealed shattered any lingering illusions. His firing, he claimed, had nothing to do with the high-profile case of Tom Cholmondeley. The real reason, he had dared to challenge the very people working behind the scenes to hijack the cocaine investigation. According to Morgor, the operation had been compromised from the beginning. Those responsible for ensuring the drugs moved discreetly through Kenya had failed, and now, desperate to cover their tracks, they were pulling strings at the highest levels of power. Because this wasn't just any shipment, it was worth 6 billion Kenyan shillings. And for the Akasha cartel, arguably one of the most powerful criminal networks in East Africa, losing that kind of money wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. So, they didn't just give up. Instead, they planned something unthinkable. A coordinated recovery mission designed to extract the seized drugs from under police watch. An audacious move, but also a desperate one. Among the names whispered behind closed doors were some of the most powerful figures in the country. Chris Murungaru, the then Security Cabinet Secretary, Stanley Murage, President Kibaki's own special advisor, operating directly out of State House, and Mary Wambui, a woman often referred to in hushed tones as the president's baby mama. According to Morgor, those weren't just bystanders. They were deeply embedded players, figures with the kind of access and influence few could challenge. His revelation sent shockwaves far beyond Kenya's borders, even drawing concerns from the United Nations. On June 22, 2005, the UN stepped forward, offering direct assistance in the investigation, but their offer was swiftly and quietly declined. The message was clear: whatever was happening, the Kenyan authorities didn't want outside eyes watching. And as months passed, the story began to rot from the inside. By August, whispers were getting louder that some of the seized cocaine had already found its way back onto the streets, resold, repackaged, vanishing into the same black market it was supposed to be shielded from. In response, the police stepped forward with a calm, practiced denial. But when members of parliament tried to inspect the storage facility themselves, they were turned away. No explanation, no access, just silence. And in that silence, suspicion thrived. Meanwhile, behind the headlines, something strange was unfolding. On September 15, 2005, a man named Richard Nerima, a former police officer, took what seemed like a routine job, personal driver to a wealthy businessman, Raju Sangani. Nothing suspicious on the surface, but Nerima had no idea what he was walking into. Because while he was just getting settled in, across the globe, another story was quietly taking shape. The same month, Mary Wambui, the woman long rumored to be the president's heir, boarded a flight to Dubai. Alongside her was her daughter, Winnie Mwai, an official in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and daughter to President Mwai Kibaki. But this wasn't a diplomatic mission, it was a holiday, or so it seemed. Because while in Dubai, the two women encountered a familiar face, Kamlesh Patni, infamous for his ties to the Goldenberg scandal, was already there, and he brought company. He introduced them to the two men whose names will soon be burned into Kenya's memory, the Artur Brothers. Their reputation notorious, their job unclear. But Patni thought they were exactly the kind of people who could help with a very specific problem back in Nairobi. A plan was forming, a dangerous one, and then something happened that no one saw coming. Winnie Mwai, the president's own daughter, developed a romantic interest in one of the brothers. It was the kind of twist that seemed innocent, almost tribal, but in the context of what was coming, it was anything but. Because this wasn't just a flirtation, it was leverage. And soon, the entire cocaine case, the cover-ups, the corruption, and the quiet whispers of conspiracy would come crashing into the public eye. The scheme was audacious and brilliantly executed. The Atur brothers wouldn't just walk into Kenya, they'll glide in under the perfect cover, posing as foreign investors while quietly slipping into the security sector. Officially, they were consultants tasked with helping establish and train a new specialized anti-narcotic unit. Unofficially, they were after one thing, the 6 billion Kenya shillings cocaine haul, now locked away under heavy guard. It was the perfect disguise. No alarms, no suspicion, just calculated access. On November 10, 2005, the first move was made. Artur Margaryan landed in Kenya. Passport number AB3222423. His invitation, extended by none other than Tycoon Raju Sangani. His destination, the Grand Regency Hotel, owned by Kamlesh Patni, a man already ceremoniously with scandal. Atur didn't settle into any room. He was placed in the presidential suite, a clear message that this was no ordinary guest. The next day, Sangani sent his personal driver, Richard Nerima, the ex-cop, now caught up in a far bigger game than he realized. Nerima picked up Atur in a sleek Mercedes, plate number KAP300R, and gave him a casual tour of Nairobi. At first glance, it looked like hospitality, but it wasn't. On November 12th, things escalated. Nerima switched vehicles, this time using a luxury limo, KAH 980M, registered to Baktash Akasha, the very name feared across global narcotic networks. That evening, Artur was driven to an exclusive dinner at the private residence of Ali Noor, a wealthy businessman in Nairobi upscale high-rise area. What followed was a week of tightly choreographed movements. Nerima chauffeured Atur across the city, but these weren't sightseeing trips. They were meetings, check-ins, strategic conversations. Artur visited 80 General Madenge Road, a residence owned by Baktash Akasha. He held quiet sit-downs with Raju Sangani, and in perhaps the most telling moment, he was seen at Acapulco restaurant on Mudidi Road, and later at Spice Roots in Muthaiga, dining with Mary Wambui. Powerful names, familiar locations, and behind the scenes, a multi-billion shilling secret was quietly moving back into play. Every night, after each closed-door meeting, Richard Nerima would return to his routine, pick up Artur, drive him through Nairobi, drop him off at the Grand Regency.
Came to Nairobi, I got a job with Raju. Nikawa kama driver yake. 2005, I think ilikuwa September. Nikiwa na yeye akaniambia kuna wazungu wanakuja. And you being an ex-police officer, ningependa uwe driver yao. Nikamwambia it's okay. So wakati walikuja evening party yao ilifanywa Parklands. Hii nini Laiko tulikuwa inaitwa Grand Regency. Ikakuwa sasa ni kama residential houses zao. Wakachukua that via presidential longi, wakaweka hata CCTV cameras. Kutoka hapo ndipo sasa tulienda kuona Kalonzo kwa sababu walikuwa wanataka expand hii nini zao. Sijui walikuwa wanasema wako na biashara. Na Kalonzo being a former foreign affairs minister, ataintroduce kwa watu outside Kenya. Hata alipiga picha na hao. Tukakutana na yeye, wakamaliza mkutano. Mimi sikuenda ndani. Ndio watu wengi walijoin in. Nikaanza kuona sasa wanabadilishwa magari. Hizi magari wanapewa ni za from State House. Ile vitu walikuwa wanafanya mimi sikufurahia. Nikaambia Rajo, no, this is my country. I love my country. But what we are doing is just against the law of this land. Watu wengi wameumia. Even this along the road. Watu wengi walinyang'anywa magari. Gari ingine sahi sijui kama imetolewa Gigiri police station. The same number hiyo iko kwa hiyo gari. Sijui kama walitoa, lakini I believe it is there. Hii barabara wamenyang'anywa watu magari. Hata ukiobstruct tu hawa wanakunyang'anya. Runda kulikuwa kumejaa magari, hakuna mahali pa kupaka magari. Iliwazawe vizuri sana. Kama director zaidi anajua. NSA inajua. Commission atakosa kujua.
But what happened inside the presidential suite was nothing but routine. Inside the heavily guarded room, Artur Margaryan wasn't alone. He was joined by Winnie Mwai, daughter of President Kibaki, and, more disturbingly, CID boss Joseph Kamau. The trio plotted in silence. This wasn't just a social affair. It was strategic. Each conversation, each whispered instruction, one step closer to their true objective. On November 15, 2005, Atur left Kenya, his destination, London, his mission complete. He had mapped out the terrain, assessed vulnerabilities, found allies in powerful places. But before leaving, he left behind something more than plans. He gave specific instructions to set up a shell company, one that will shield their real identities from any legal fallout. By December 1st, that company, Brotherlink International, was born, certified number C120905. And with that, the operation had its green light. From Dubai, the brothers didn't hesitate. On December 13th, they returned, both of them. Artur Margaryan, passport number AB32222423, and Artur Sargsyan, passport number AF0599780, landed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. But this time, they weren't laying groundwork. They were here to execute. Without delay, they headed straight to the presidential seat at the Grand Regency, where they re-established their base of operation and waited for orders from above. And the wheels were turning fast. Just 2 days later, Artur Sargsyan applied for a Kenya Revenue Authority. It was issued almost instantly. A0035133570, a detail that might be minor unless you knew what was coming next. That KRA pin wasn't just a bureaucratic step, it was a passport into legitimacy. With it, the Artur Brothers registered a second front, Kensington Limited. On paper, it looked ordinary, but its directors told a different story. There was Winnie Mwai, the president's daughter, and Alois Omita, the personal assistant to Mary Wamboi, the president's long-term companion. Officially incorporated on January 8, 2006, under certificate number C121807, Kensington Limited wasn't a business. It was a shield, a way to blend in, to move money, to move weapons. Because soon after, the masks came off. On a quiet stretch of Oyaki Way, two elite presidential escort cubs, Ali Japani and David Gaito, were driving in a Toyota Lexus, license plate KAQ 010W. They never made it to their destination. Intercepted, abducted, the Artur brothers, posing as security experts, kidnapped them, stripping them of their firearms, a Seska pistol, serial number G7709, a Sig Sauer pistol, serial number U420588, both vanished. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Because when investigators traced the ownership of the white Lexus used in the kidnapping, it led straight to Mary Wambui, the woman with ties to the president, the mother of Winnie Mwai, and now mother-in-law to Artur Margaryan. That single vehicle connected the dots from the very top echelons of government to a drug cartel armed operative to a planned violent extraction. This wasn't just infiltration, it was occupation, and nobody in power was willing to stop it. After the Artur brothers had abducted two presidential escort officers, the tension in the air thickened. They didn't just steal firearms, they stole control. They'd taken 2 handguns, 30 rounds of ammunition, and most importantly, they had claimed a presidential vehicle, Mary Wambui's prized Lexus. With this new arsenal, they weren't just playing a game anymore. They were the ones calling the shots. On January 18, 2006, they took another step: work permits. A simple formality, right? Well, wrong. The Artur brothers weren't your average applicants. They had money, a hefty Emirates bank account filled with 198,575 dirhams, roughly 8 million Kenyan shillings. They didn't just want to enter Kenya, they wanted to invest. And the speed with which the immigration department approved their permits told you everything. No delays, no bureaucracy. The decision was made on the same day. The meeting was led by Evelyn Chelugud, who now serves as the Director of Immigration. Her signature will be all over the approval, but the real story lay underneath. 316 files, all meticulously revived, and they were given the green light. For the Arturs, it was game on. They were now in the clear. No one was stopping them. But soon, the cracks began to show. As the business began to grow, the National Intelligence Service caught wind. They'd heard whispers, seen patterns, and then, in mid-February 2006, the Atur made a move that raised more than just a few eyebrows. They requested to install CCTV cameras in their presidential suite at the Grand Regency Hotel. Why would men who were posing in as investors need surveillance? What were they watching? Who were they really protecting? The more questions that arose, the deeper the mystery became. The NIS wasn't fooled for long. They dug deeper, and what they uncovered was nothing short of shocking. The Artur brothers weren't business moguls. They weren't investors. They were conmen, nothing more. And their story, a lie. Turns out, they had been deported from the UAE back in 1994, not for business, but for trying to bribe a cop. The truth was out, and it was a fatal mistake. But the Artur brothers weren't about to fold. In the midst of mounting pressure, they held an urgent meeting in their presidential suite to figure out how to stay one step ahead. The heat was on. The stakes were high. That's when Wambui stepped up. She had a solution, a house in Lavington, not far from the Cuban embassy. It was secluded, but still too exposed. They needed something more discreet. That's when Ranju Sangani entered the conversation, suggesting a more private option, a house in Runda. It was perfect, secluded, hidden, far away from the prying eyes of the NIS and any other potential threat. And so, they moved into house number 977, tucked away on Glory Road, just off Runda Grove, a mansion that will become the heart of the operation. But this wasn't just a safe house. No, it became their playground. Every Friday, the Aturs threw lavish parties, a celebration of excess and luxury. The guest list, A-list celebrities, media personalities, and the elite, Sheila Mwanyiga, Eve D'Souza, Shiku Mwiruri, names everyone knew. They mingled over barbecues, drinks, and whispered conversations in the shadows. It was an atmosphere of pure decadence, and yet, beneath the flashy parties and glamour, something dark was brewing. The Artur brothers were getting closer to their goal, and no one knew what they were really after. Atur Margaryan, a name that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who crossed his path. At the parties, he was the center of attention, the smooth talker who had effortlessly won the favor of Winnie Mwai, the president's daughter. But his charm didn't stop there. He played the part of the charming Romeo, picking up radio host Shiku Mwiruri like she was a feather, all for a photo op. It wasn't just a party, it was his world, and everyone else was just living in it. But weekdays, that's when the true chaos began. The Aturs weren't just about luxury and glamour. They were ruthless, destroying lives all over the city. They stole cars, they extorted, they robbed. Babu Walji, son of a former Westlands MP, was one of their many victims. His BMW X5 disappearing without a trace. Then there was Mr. Bashit in Lavington, who found his Toyota Harrier gone in a blink of an eye, and businessman Mohammed Merali. They snatched 2 phones and jewelry worth 420,000 Kenya shillings. Nothing was safe, and it didn't stop there. On March 1st, 2006, the Aturs took their game to another level. Raju Sangani's driver chauffeured them from their Runda mansion to Twiga Towers, the office of their business partner. What followed was nothing short of insane. As they sat in the office, the audacity of the Arturs reached another level. Special Crimes Officer George, tasked with investigating their activities, snapped their photos, but instead of arresting them, George did the unthinkable. He issued certificates appointing the Artur brothers as deputy police commissioners. Yes, you heard that right. The brothers, conmen and criminals, were now above the law. Their grip on Kenya's underworld was tightening. They were untouchable, and the web of corruption they wove grew darker every passing day. It all started with a drive. Nerima, the unsuspecting driver, was told to take the Artur brothers on a shopping spree through Nairobi CBD. He had no idea what was coming. The Artur brothers picked up 20 reflector jackets from Kijabe Street, then headed to Kimathi Street for a bunch of caps. The next stop, Nakumatt, where they grabbed 20 wireless radios. Nerima thought it was just another weird errand. He was about to find out he was wrong. The very next day, Nerima gets a call from Raju Sangani. He is told to come to the office, and when he arrives, the Artur brothers and some of their associates are already there. They give him the order: drive a few of them to the I&M building, while the rest pile into a Toyota Lexus KAQ 010W, driven by the presidential escort officer named Kirimi. Where were they going? Likoni Road. But Nerima didn't know why. The destination, a media house, Standard Media Group. Why? To silence them. The government had gotten wind of a story they didn't want getting out. So, in the true Atur fashion, they orchestrated an all-out raid. Armed mercenaries stormed the building, taking hostages and throwing the newsroom into utter chaos. It was like a scene straight out of a nightmare, and the world watched. The government, the Artur Brothers, and their dangerous network weren't playing around anymore. This wasn't just a case crime, it was a full-scale conspiracy. And Nerima, he was trapped in it, whether he realized it or not. It's hard to believe this, right? Mercenaries hired by the government.
Ya kuchukua hizi picha, ilikuwa inatakana wakienda pale waonekane hii raid kwa standard imefanywa na polisi. That was the plan. So after the raid, the computers, they didn't go anywhere. They came to KIA. Mutua is away. Mutua ndiye alireceive you vipi?
I was leading the raid. The raid supposed to be done by Joseph Kamau, but then he asked help because QRU was not to participate on this kind of things. But Joseph asked the help. So we agreed that QRU would participate in the raid. So, Inoti, Joseph Kamau, Francis, and Rachel. We went, we do the first look, then we plan in my house, Runda house. Then we call the boys for the briefing. We collect the mobiles from the boys. We distribute the weapons for only self-defense. And we execute the plan.
Why did you raid KTN?
Well, it was information we received that after that article of the Kibaki and Colonzo secret meetings, so it was information that KTN is having.
Sounds like something out of a bad movie. But then, the security minister publicly admitted it. There were government operatives and the world was left stunned. The plot thickened. The connection between the Artur brothers and the mercenaries, it all led back to Mary Wambui, the president's baby mama. The more they dug, the more it seemed like she was tangled up in high-stakes game. But how deep did it go? To cover their tracks, the Atur staged a comeback. And it wasn't just any comeback. This was a sin. They drove straight to JKIA, not in a private car, but in 2 government vehicles. They knew what they were doing. Here's the twist. Instead of arriving in the duty-free shop lodge like everyone else, Artur Margaryan held a press conference in the VIP lodge, a bizarre move that raised eyebrows. Standing right beside him, Fred Ngatia, the big shot lawyer, helping make it all look legit. But the more the government played their cards, the more they exposed themselves. Their disrespect for the Kenyan sovereignty by letting foreign mercenaries run free was too much to ignore. And then Raila Odinga had had enough. He exploded into a fiery outburst. Kuna mamluki Kenya.
Doesn't it strike you as very strange when a raid takes place like the one that took place in the I&M building and the Standard Printing Press in Likoni? The minister in charge of security comes up and owns and says that a snake was rattled and therefore the snake bit back. It now transpired that those who were involved in the raid were actually not regular police officers, actually mercenaries or foreigners. Why would the government be using these gentlemen to do what was, according to them, perfectly legitimate police duty?
There's a lot of allegations, there's a lot of counter allegations. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know where you got information from that they were with the CID prior to the attack. I don't know. Who saw them? Is there any evidence that they were with the CID?
The Atur brothers, the government, the mercenaries, They were all part of the same tangled web. But how far did this reach? The backlash came fast. Days after Raila's fiery warning, the government scrambled to save face. They sent a team to arrest the Artur brothers at their fortress in Runda, but they clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. Artur Margaryan met them at the gate with a smirk. He dared them to try anything. No fear, no hesitation, just defiance. This message was loud and clear. We are not going anywhere. And then things got even more surreal. On March 16th, 2006, Atur made a bold appearance at KTN offices, trying to spin the story his way. He painted himself as some rich, misunderstood businessman. I spent 150,000 on my girlfriend, he bragged on camera. But the charm offensive failed badly. As he left, the streets erupted. A furious mob gathered, shouting, "Mamluki." They weren't buying it. To them, he was a billionaire investor, was a foreign invader. And as the chants grew louder, the crowd surged. Things were turning violent. He was just moments from being lynched until the police showed up, pulling him out of the chaos. Rattled but not backing down, Atur doubled down on paranoia. He imported 5 Dobermans from Dubai, as if dogs could stop the truth. Then came the crocodiles. Yes, crocodiles, guarding his mansion like some villain from a Bond movie. It was unhinged, but in his mind, it was necessary, because even he knew the walls were closing in. For the next month, the Artur brothers stayed in the spotlight, but not in a good way. Their scandal was the biggest story in the country. And still, they didn't stop. Instead, they doubled down. In a reckless move, they paid a Somali middleman who then bribed an immigration cleaner with just 750 Kenyan shillings, enough to steal 3 Kenyan passports. The passports were fake, registered under Russian names. It was all part of a dangerous new plan. Then came June 8th. That's when the Artur brothers pulled their most brazen stunt yet. They stormed Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, guns down, demanding that their guests be let out of the country. It was a full-on siege. The government had no choice. The next morning, they raided the Runda mansion. Inside, they found it all: stolen firearms, fake passports, illicit vehicles, and enough evidence to put a small army away. The Artur brothers were finally deported, and just like that, Kenya's most bizarre and terrifying political scandal was over, at least on the surface. To calm the public, the president launched a commission of inquiry, but most saw it for what it was: a cover-up, a show, an attempt to protect the insiders who had enabled it all. The real story buried deep beneath the surface. And while all this played out, there was one more twist. Back on March 2nd, when the Standard Group media was raided, they weren't just after journalists. They were after something else: the cocaine. They didn't find it. Panic, the government rushed to do damage control. On March 26th, in front of the UN officials, they buried the cocaine publicly. But by then, the damage was already done. The brothers were gone. The cocaine was ashes. But the truth, it's still out there, hidden in the shadows. The Artur brothers didn't just expose a scandal. They exposed the rot at the heart of a system. A system where criminals become cops, mercenaries walked through VIP terminals, and foreigners held more power than the country's own citizens. They came in as investors, left as deported fugitives, and in between, tore through the fabric of Kenya's democracy like a hurricane. But here's the truth. They didn't do it alone. They had help from politicians, from police, from people sworn to protect the country, but instead sold it out. The cocaine banned, the mercenaries gone. The questions are still here, and maybe the most haunting part of it all: no one was ever truly held accountable. The Atur saga wasn't just about 2 foreign conmen. It was about the people who let them in, who protected them, who let them operate with impunity until the cameras showed up. And that's the part that still lingers. Because if it happened once, who's to say it can't happen again? Nairobi Insight.